The internet is a funny thing these days. So many young people concerned about social media and clout. However, there is a man who probably has more online clout than any of these upcoming TikTokers or influencers. The man that we all know as Joe Rogan. Sitting at 7.3 million Twitter followers and 13 million on Instagram, along with a devoted podcast following. That's a whole lot of online clout for a man in his 50s. Today, Joe Rogan is interviewing anyone and everyone from alien experts to the young YouTubers to the legends of comedy. Jumping online early on in his career has allowed him to ride to the top of Hollywood success in this new digital era. But it didn't happen overnight, and the man has been through hell and high water to get to where he's at today. When he quit martial arts to pursue stand-up comedy, he delivered newspapers, drove a limo, did construction, worked for a private investigator while booking gigs at a strip club. Lots to get through, ladies and gentlemen, so if you want to know more about the story of Joe Rogan, stay tuned. Joseph James Rogan was born on August 11, 1967 in Newark, New Jersey. His family are immigrants who came to America in the 1940s, and he's 3 parts Italian and 1 part Irish. As the story goes, and Rogan has explained on his podcast, his father, a police officer, was abusive and walked out on him and his mother when he was 7 years old. He told Rolling Stone in 2015 that he hasn't seen his father in decades, and that most of his memories of him are these brief, violent flashes of domestic violence. Joe himself was never beaten, but he took his anger out on his mother. Rolling Stone actually tracked down Joe's father, and his response was, "I don't talk about people the way they talk about me. That's not in my DNA. What's gone is gone." Sounds like a guilty conscience to me. Following his parents' divorce, he and his mother bounced around for some time, living in San Francisco to Florida before settling in Boston, where he attended Newton South High School. For the most detailed info about Joe's come-up, we dug up an old article from a magazine known as Black Belt from 2002. In there, he explained that from as young as age 7, he became obsessed with fitness and working out every single day. This was also around the time his dad had walked out on his mom and he had begun taking out his anger and hitting his cousins. There was a brief period in time where he started hanging out with the wrong crowd as a teenager. That is until he discovered Taekwondo. Speaking on this, he stated, "I developed so much discipline and so much insight about life that I don't think I really would have learned otherwise. You can learn some of those lessons from regular sports, but I don't think you have the same heightened sense of danger and the reward for winnings." He continued, "I just don't think I would have been the same person had I not done martial arts." Rogan began competitive Taekwondo at the age of 15. Within 4 years, he would win his first US Open Grand Championship. As the lightweight champion, he defeated the middleweight and heavyweight champions. His other passion and career would be comedy. He attended a Richard Pryor show at 13 with his parents and sat in amazement at the spectacle of one man on stage making people laugh uncontrollably. His own practice would start out with him goofing off with his buddies in his Taekwondo school back in Boston. After obtaining his black belt, he retired from Taekwondo and kickboxing in 1989 once he started getting headaches and was worried about concussions or permanent brain damage. On top of this, he had realized that unless he wanted to teach martial arts for the rest of his life, there was no money in fighting at the time. There was, however, money to be made in stand-up comedy, so he shifted his focus and began doing open mic nights at Boston clubs like Stitches and Nick's Comedy Shop. Eventually, the young aspiring comic would make the move to LA. While there, he took a series of odd jobs while pursuing comedy. He delivered newspapers, drove a limo, did construction, and worked as a private investigator. He had to climb the stand-up circuit working low-end jobs at bachelor parties and strip clubs. He eventually found a manager named Jeff Sussman, who had Rogan relocate to New York, and from there, he booked a gig on MTV's half-hour comedy hour. Soon after, he got a sitcom titled Hardball. Having never acted before, the show only lasted 2 months before the network pulled the plug. The show had potential, having been created by the writers from The Simpsons and Married with Children. Rogan played an egotistical baseball player on a team full of misfits and perverts, but it wasn't the hit Fox was hoping for. Soon after came News Radio, which took him back to California and made him a celebrity. The show perhaps gave him his first look at his future as a podcaster. News Radio ran for 5 seasons and paid him enough money that he could also really focus on his stand-up. He also married Jessica Ditzel, with whom he has 3 children. During this time, he also picked up a part-time gig as a commentator for the UFC, which at the time was a relatively unknown sport. Then there was Fear Factor, which Rogan initially thought would be canceled in no time. The show was a huge success despite being a show that Joe admittedly hated doing, but the money was too good to resist, having stated, "After a while, it was like, Jesus Christ, how many animal dicks can you serve people?" It was Fear Factor that made him a household name, but that's really only half the story. His comedy career continued to ramp up, and he got on the internet early, starting in 2009. This is when Joe started a free podcast with his friend and fellow comedian Brian Redband. The show started as a pretty loose, free-flowing show that featured him and his buddies shooting the shit. By 2010, they had named the show The Joe Rogan Experience, and the following year, it was picked up by SiriusXM Radio. Joe always featured a wide range of guests that discuss a plethora of topics such as current events, politics, philosophy, comedy, hobbies, and numerous other topics. Like, you could really see anyone or anything become a discussion on this show. By 2015, The Joe Rogan Experience had been downloaded over 11 million times, making it one of the most popular podcasts of all time. Joe has always been championed for his inquisitive, impartial, unbiased way of asking questions and generating conversation. In 2013, Joe landed his own show on the Sci-Fi Network titled Joe Rogan Questions Everything, which featured 6 episodes of Joe covering some of the most out there topics such as Bigfoot, UFOs, topics that would often show up in discussion on the Joe Rogan Experience. In May 2020, Rogan had announced that he had signed a multi-year licensing deal with Spotify, which is worth over an estimated $100 million, making it one of the biggest deals in podcast history. This saw the show be exclusively streamed in its entirety on Spotify itself, while some clips are still available on YouTube. In fact, Joe is pretty outspoken about anything he is passionate about and believes to be true. Joe has been an outspoken advocate for the legalized use of cannabis, oftentimes openly smoking on his podcast. Joe has also been known to speak about his experiences with DMT and the enhancement of consciousness. Joe really is a big fan of this kind of stuff when he was also featured in the documentary DMT, The Spirit Molecule, as a presenter. Joe is an all-around pretty spiritual guy. Although there have been numerous times where Joe has received backlash or controversy for his views and opinions. Joe has made a stance to not support things such as routine infant circumcision. He has also been a critic on whether trans women should be permitted to fight cisgendered women in MMA matches. His most infamous moment came recently during the COVID-19 pandemic, as he consistently spoke about the virus, saying that young and healthy people should not be concerned about it. On September 1st, Rogan did test positive for the virus, and after releasing a statement he posted to his social media profiles, he listed a number of remedies that he was using to treat himself, which did include ivermectin, which is said to be a drug typically used on livestock to treat parasite infections. Rogan has since criticized CNN and other media outlets for the narrative created about his use of the drug. Joe also has a number of Netflix specials that are absolutely hilarious with triggered and strange times. So whether it be a UFC broadcast, a stand-up comedy show, or a podcast, you can pretty much see Joe Rogan everywhere, and it will be interesting to see where his career goes from here. Thanks for checking out this video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and leave a comment for who you would like to see featured next.